Ard Mhacha Nunn here. From the earliest of times, there was a need to commune with the universe. Life depended on it. The wild elements, our latest crop of vegetables or barley, the fertility of our stock, the newborn calves and sheep arriving in spring, our life depended on it. The seer or the shaman or even the thane celebrated with animal sacrifices, offerings of food or valued gifts, offerings to impress the gods. They were responsible for the well-being of the community. If they went hungry, there was a reason for that failure. Ard Mhacha was always seen as a place to commune with the gods and goddesses. The lives of men and kings depended on it. It was named after the goddess of the land of air. Her domain was battle and the rule of kings. Monks sailed to that island from the Iberian Peninsula. They came with Mediterranean traders. They found it an auspicious location for a church. They established an ecclesiastical centre, a monastery, a place of Christian learning. It had a scriptorium which housed the Annal of Dare. A neighbouring kingdom. Patrick was one of the monks who came. They brought the gospel according to the saints. They believed the saints close to God, and the message they brought was one God for all, not just kings, lords and priests. The local folk were intrigued. Here's the clincher. They promised a divine afterlife. Ordinary folk might have had a marginal plot of land. They could expect 1-2 crops at best. They had to milk a cow if they were rich enough to have a cow. They had to find fodder for their sheep or goats, and had to till the fields and harvest for their lord. Life was just an endless struggle. After this brutal toil, a peaceful afterlife would be very attractive. The ancients' beliefs were uncertain. They were riddled with imaginary horrors of spirits, demons, fires of Hades. Gods of the skies, the seas, the sun, the stars, they had no interest in ordinary people. If you're a king or a great warrior, you might expect preferential treatment on entering the netherworld, but it was just uncertainty, a mystery. The prospect of a heavenly afterlife after this suffering, the ordinary folk grasped it gleefully. The pagans were on a hiding to nothing for the hearts and minds of ordinary folk. The traders brought the monks. These early pilgrims were sensitive to the ordinary folk. Their spiritual guidance was laced with common sense and tailored to absorb local spirits of lakes, streams and mountains. The Lord saw this compliance and recognised a role to unite the people in a divine purpose, the sanctity of the tribe or the town or the kingdom. There was mutual gain to be had with the church and the rulers. They supported one another. The priests had the security of the Lord's men-at-arms, who were often dressed with Christian symbols. The Lords had their people gathered in a submissive mood to hear the sermons, with imaginary pictures of saints performing holy deeds, very conducive to a peaceful community. Rome saw the writing on the wall, or perhaps it was in the cellars of the rural villas. The Romanized Christians performed their ceremonies hidden from local communities. Eventually the Pope sent Augustine to Britannia to persuade the local monks to adhere to the Catholic doctrine, to weed out diversity of beliefs and practices. They imposed the Latin Gospels, which distanced the ordinary folk. Like most people, they could not read. 400 long years after the Romans withdrew from Deva, a fortress from which they were going to invade Ayr, the Northmen arrived into the outer isles of Britain and Ayr, and then the Danes came to Ayr. They sailed up the southeast estuaries, they settled. They created trading hubs, and a lucrative commodity was slaves. They got word of the halls of monastic communities where a tribute was collected from lords and folk to speak to God on their behalf. The Danish warrior merely had to display courage in battle to be welcomed by a host of Valkyries into Odin's hall, where he could expect endless drinking, feasting, reliving battles in saga and song. The Danes were seafaring folk. They traded the Frisian coast up into the Baltic, probably the coast of Francia and Hispania. A voyage across the German Sea, as the Saxons referred to it, would have been a cruise. Life at home was tough, unless you dreamed of ocean fishing and happened to be rich enough to own a ship. The land was unattainable. There was no great expanse. It was controlled by the Danish aristocracy and guarded by their armies. If you had a field to rent, it was a privilege and very hard to come by. The Danes saw the islands on the west of the Northern Sea as an opportunity for wealth and a place to settle. Mael, son of an Irish noble, was plucked from his secure home and dropped into the world of the Danish invaders. He saw a different worldview. Warlords responsible to provide for their men and families. Hostility was met with hostility, and the violence escalated as the Saxons saw the need to defend their land. I'm reminded of the saying, if you start a war, you cannot control it. It will control you. What causes or conditions make us decide to act, to leave our homeland and travel to an alien foreign land? Is it traditions, culture? Is it family influences? I am told that our peers impart most pressure on our decisions. Mael sees the world of the pagan, the traditions, the rites, the sacrifices. He sees how others make sense of their world, how they define it in terms of their own needs, and how that affects others around them. Cultures have a foundation of ideas and truths, represented in sacred stories and their images. When people meet, they identify those images as symbols of their tribe. The images serve to bind individuals as a tribe. At times of conflict, those images unify people to the campaign for the homeland cause. They become symbols, banners, and a rallying cry. The Chronicle of the Ostmen portrays a clash of traditions, the Danish invasion of Ireland and the Isles of Britain. Illustrated are the images of that time, that lords, their farmer tenants and oath givers would have used to place themselves in that world, their tradition, their tribe, their land. I hope you enjoy the Chronicle of the Ostmen.